Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Happy June. And if you hear me sounding a little bit hoarse today, well, you are not wrong. I was at a hen party. For those of you who are international listeners, a bachelorette over the weekend. And I was badly singing karaoke in a cafe stroke bar stroke club in Whitby, which, and it genuinely did actually have cafe stroke bar stroke club on the front of the window, which brought up a whole clarity problem. If you've listened to any of the episodes of the podcast about choosing a niche, you will know why I have a problem with that. But if you haven't, go and find some of those episodes. And it turns out that I actually don't know a lot of the words to my favourite songs, which I thought I did. So at some point, somebody very wise took the microphone away from me so that people who did know the words could take over. I will also point out, at that point in time, I had only had one glass of Prosecco, so I cannot even blame it on the fact that I had been drinking. It is literally that I just don't know the words to a lot of the favourite songs that I thought I did. Apart from Eminem. So, if you are into 90s rap, then apparently I have you covered. But a lot of other artists, not so much. So today's episode is all about those 5 important things to remember when you're creating an offer to sell to corporate clients. And I'm really excited to dive into this particular episode. There are a few reasons that I think it's really important that we discuss this now, as opposed to later in the year. And we've also got some really cool episodes coming up across June, July, and August as well. I am spending my week this week batching those episodes for your ears. So get excited because I'll be sharing some episodes on things like the sales activity that you need to do over the summer to line yourself up for an awesome September, because as we all know, it's the most profitable month of the year if you do the right things. And we'll also be talking about your half year to date, which may or may not feel like an uncomfortable episode for you. But we're going to talk about what you've done if you were an overachiever and have smashed all of your 2025 targets so far, and what to do if you have not. And yeah, we're going to cover off a lot of things over the next few weeks. But today we are talking about offers, and I'm going to use this moment to offer you, see what I did there, an opportunity to join my free newsletter. Because it has come to my attention that, and I say it's come to my attention, somebody pointed out to me that I never promote my newsletter on the podcast. And they're like, it's so weird, Jess, because I wasn't on your newsletter for ages, but I religiously listened to your podcast. I just didn't know you had a newsletter. So here is my reminder. And I will be reminding you over the next few weeks as well, because I'm just not active on social media anymore. Don't know whether anyone noticed or cared. I'm not sure I noticed or cared. But in the event that you didn't know that I do have a free newsletter, please go over to sellingtocorporate.com, click on the free resources banner at the top right of the page. And if you download any of those free resources, you will be offered the opportunity, thank you GDPR, to sign up to my free weekly newsletter. And I send out free newsletters on a Wednesday that tend to be educational and practical tips around selling to corporate clients, and on a Friday as well, designed to inspire you, motivate you, give that loving kick up the behind that you might need to get prepped for the week ahead. So if you are interested in getting me inside your inbox twice a week, then go and sign up for any of the free resources and you will have that opportunity to sign up for the newsletter as well. All right, let's talk about offers. There are a few reasons that I want to touch on this. And I think in true kind of, podcaster / educator ways, we often start with things like I've had a few questions. Now, there's a real trend on the internet at the moment to be like, well, how many people asked you that question? And did anyone really ask you that question? And I don't really want to get into it. The reason that I'm including this episode in this year's podcast lineup is because more than ever before in 2025, I have heard people say to me, Jess, I want to sell to corporate companies, but I don't have an offer yet. So I need to wait and figure out what my offer is going to be before I can start my sales process. Wrong answer. Now, I want to explain during this episode exactly why this is such a bad idea. And for those of you who are listening thinking, oh, well, that's cool because I've already got corporate offers that I'm selling because I've been selling to corporates for a million years, I also want you to listen up because there are some key mistakes that people are making and they are happening more in 2025 than any other year. And honestly, it's driving me kind of bonkers watching it because, I think it should be easier. We should be focusing in 2025 on making life simple. And in turn, that will make life easy. But there are common themes that are coming up. Now, obviously, I say to everybody, it's interesting when people tell me all of the reasons why they are not currently selling to corporate clients or why they are not as successful at selling to corporate clients as they would like to be. And this offer one, it has come up a lot this year. Honestly, it has come up possibly more than any other topic in 2025. And so when we talk about offers and what I would put under that banner, I just want to define it for you really quickly. I've had more questions in 2025 from people who have been considering buying my programs or courses around pricing offers, benchmarking pricing, what offers are selling well, whether or not they should have sales pages, how they can sell new offers, whether insert type of thing is more likely to sell than insert type of other thing. So when we're talking about offers today, we are talking specifically about the solution that you are going to provide to corporate clients that is paid for. Okay. And so under that offers banner, for me, things that come up are design, delivery, pricing, and transformation. Those are the areas that we are encapsulating when we're talking about offers. So if you are currently trying to sell offers that are not selling as well as you thought, or if you have never put together a corporate offer before and you're kind of freaking out about it and using that as a way to stop yourself selling to corporate clients, then this is really a good episode for you. And as always, if you like the episode, you think it's relevant to you, please go and share it with a friend because, I'm doing this on the internet. I'm doing this good work for free on the internet. So if you know it'd be useful to a friend, go and share away with them. All right. So if we know that offers are how we get paid, i.e., we have to sell something in order to get paid for it, and then we have to deliver that, it's always interesting that it should not be where we start in our sales process. Now, what I mean by that is that I hear from a lot of people who will say to me, Jess, I'd love to take your course, but I haven't created an offer yet. When I've created an offer, I'm going to come back to you and take your sales course because I can't sell my offer until I know what my offer is. And honestly, I don't know where this mentality has come from. And I want to talk about it transparently because I think that it may come from this idea that in order to more confidently sell something, we have to know exactly what it is that we are selling. Now that can, in some sales environments, be true, but there are exceptions. Okay, so for example, if you were going to be selling cars, if you're going to be selling cars in a dealership, then absolutely. Because it is a product, because you will need to understand very clearly what the features are, then yes, it can be useful to know what that is in advance. Trouble is, most of the people who listen to this podcast are coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, and done-for-you service providers. And that means that you are not often selling products. You are selling services, and they are designed to create some level of transformation. Now, we know that when companies buy, they are buying based on transformation, and they are buying from the service provider who can give them the reassurance and show them that that particular service is going to support them in achieving the transformation they want. It's not like a car where if it has four wheels and an engine, arguably it's a vehicle, right? So it doesn't really matter. What tends to matter to people who buy cars are things like colour, things like how fast it goes, solid features that are usually not able to be changed. When companies are buying from service providers, they're looking for transformation. So they're looking for a particular outcome to be achieved. And actually, there are so many different methods of delivery and ways that that can be achieved that companies are not looking for somebody who will be inflexible. Okay, it's actually one of the biggest differences between a company buying from a small supplier and a company buying from a large established organization. And if you haven't listened, I did a couple of episodes on this about why companies want to work with small providers. Please go and listen, because there are so many people who get stuck in their own head, A, about being, a smaller supplier, and will big companies really buy from them? Spoiler, yes, they will. But B, there are so many reasons that companies choose to work with smaller suppliers. And one of the main ones is the fact that they are able to get much better service and get best fit services for the transformation that they are looking to achieve. Whereas larger organizations have spent years and years and years selling the same thing. They have spent years and years and years hiring and expanding. And all of those costs have to be factored in to the offers that they are selling each year. So they will only sell their most profitable, the ones that they have the resource for. And that means there's a lot of red tape around those offers. And it means that they are often unable to be changed unless you go into enterprise levels or incredibly expensive levels of change. All right. And it's one of the key selling points of being a smaller supplier is that we don't have to do that. We can, shock horror, actually sell solutions that meet the need of the client. So when people say to me, oh, but I cannot start a sales process until I know what my offers are, I think, oh, that's going to be very difficult, because if you haven't ever done any sales calls, you have no idea what people actually want. Okay. And so it becomes this chicken and egg situation. And now I believe that the reason that we're in this kind of weird chicken and egg cycle with it is because the online space for most people is where they will start their own business, and they will usually start trying to sell to other individuals. And the common theme there is that your services then should be designed to help people who are a few steps behind you. Okay. And so for that reason, you can look back and remember, what was I feeling at that time? What was I experiencing at that time? What problems did I have? And you can start to map out an offer that is designed to be generic enough that it can be marketed to the masses. Okay? Because if we think about that B2C, business to consumer sales model, we're trying to get as much volume in the top of a funnel as possible. And then through, free content, social media content, et cetera, whittling them down into a small percentage, 1% to 2%, who will buy at any one time. When we're selling to organizations, that isn't the case. We are not looking for generic offers that can be marketed to the masses. And I'm going to go into some of the practicalities about that in a second. But what happens if we don't start a sales process, meaning if we don't target a particular industry, meaning if we don't do appropriate lead generation to generate qualified leads who actually are interested in our area of specialism and who hold the budget to pay us? And if we don't have sales calls with those people, it means that we often don't actually know what they want or how they talk about it or what their real problems are. Instead, we're always guessing. And unless you've come from an experienced corporate background in the exact area that you are currently trying to sell and deliver services, it makes it very, very difficult. And I honestly don't know that many people who decide to come out of a corporate job and then do exactly what they did in corporate in their own business. That's actually quite a small percentage of people. In fact, most people leave a corporate career because either they weren't enjoying it or because they were burnt out or because they had a passion in some other area. It's why there are actually so many health and wellness providers, because a lot of people have a corporate job, decide that they, don't want that anymore, or perhaps they've had a bad experience or burnt out, and they go and find their true passion. And for a lot of people, their true passion is health and wellness. And for those of you who that is, I'm incredibly impressed. I'm wondering when that's going to kick in for me. But seriously, it's important to understand that unless you are planning on selling and delivering the exact same services you did inside corporate companies, you probably don't actually know what the problems are. You probably don't know what the language is that is being used around those problems or desired transformations. And even if you are trying to sell the exact same thing that you were doing inside a corporate company as an employee, it's highly unlikely that you were ever involved in the thought process behind why that role existed. You might not have gotten to a level where you were responsible for planning those pieces of work that you were implementing. You might not have been on the strategic side of things. You might have been more of a doer. And again, that's not me being disparaging at all. I think implementers are the best thing that a company can ever have. But it does make it really, really difficult from a sales perspective because you're not always sure how to gain influence, how to get buy-in, how to identify and diagnose the most pressing issue right now. And that's where people start to struggle with offer creation. And so if we just go ahead and start creating these offers, I see it on the internet a lot, people will just start, they'll be like, I'm going to do a 6-week group program for leaders inside organizations, and it's going to be £9,997 per person. And, they'll go on and on and on about all these things that the leaders will get. And then nobody buys it. They're really disheartened. And they'll always say, but Jess, it must be the price. And it isn't. A lot of the time, it's because you actually had zero sales process. You spent hours and hours creating this offer that you didn't actually sense check at any point. And when we're creating these offers without understanding what organizations actually want and need, we can fall into really difficult traps to navigate. Things like not using language that they actually use, so it doesn't sound like something they need, even if it is. We can end up inadvertently screwing our sales calls because if we create offers, we only look at the buying indicators for those offers. So if somebody isn't saying, but we would want one-to-one coaching for these particular people, we end up feeling like they didn't have a need that we could actually, support. I call this square peg syndrome. If you've heard the phrase, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, this is what happens to a lot of people. They'll plan out all of these offers to the nth degree. They'll price them, they'll name them, they'll create sales pages for them. And then they won't sell them because on a sales call, they're only looking for the language that they would use about their offer. They're only looking for the delivery method that they would be talking about with their offer. And what that means is that the poor person on the other end of the call doesn't feel heard at all. That poor stakeholder that you're talking to doesn't feel like you are listening to what their problem is, and they don't feel like you are giving them any kind of diagnostic, which means that they are not going to work with you. So what I'm saying is, or I guess what my first point of 5 is that if you are spending lots and lots of time mapping out offers, but you are having very few sales calls or have had 0 sales calls, it's quite unlikely that whatever you plan will sell effectively. So instead, your job should be start your sales process. Start the pieces of your sales process, like lead generation, effective lead generation, that is going to bring you sales calls. And on those sales calls, that's where you can really start to dive into offer creation. Now, I know that some of you are listening to this and being like, yeah, but Jess, I'd like to know the bigger picture before I get started. If I don't know what I'm selling, how will I be able to go on a sales call? I won't feel very confident, etc., etc. And I get that. But sales is a process. And, offers or the articulation of your offer is not what sells it. The questions that you ask on a sales call are. The way that you respond to the diagnostics that are given to you on a sales call is how you sell an offer. The way that you are able to show how your solution is going to help reduce or remove the pain points that they're currently experiencing and get them to the transformation they want is going to sell your offer, not what it looks like on a PDF. Okay? If you are starting to worry about the big picture and all those kinds of things, hit reply to one of those free newsletters that I told you about at the beginning of this episode, because I can always recommend other podcast episodes that you can go and listen to that might help with some of those things and help you start putting the puzzle together. And of course, if you are in one of my programs, if you're inside the C-suite, for example, you will already know what that big picture process looks like. And it might be worth going and familiarizing yourself with it or refamiliarizing it with yourself. That was terrible grammar, wasn't it? Refamiliarizing yourself with it if you have started to fall into bad habits. We all do it. There's no shame in that, but you need to start thinking strategically. Okay, so point number one is you shouldn't be mapping out endless offers. It's a big mistake because it will really reduce your ability to sell. Square peg syndrome will reduce that ability to sell. A lack of sales call will reduce that ability to sell. And not really having any kind of idea of what companies are looking for will reduce that ability for you to sell. Now, the second thing that I see, or the second mistake I see people making around offer creation, is thinking that they need certain practicalities to sell an offer to companies. And those practicalities being things that aren't actually useful or relevant. So things like creating lots of social media posts about their offers, or creating sales pages for their corporate offers. Now, don't get me wrong, in the B2C world, again, these are very, very common things. These are normal because we are having to sell one mass offer to a wide market. And obviously, people want information. And we know that if you're selling business to consumer, you have to stay top of mind. You have to be talking to people about things all the time. Otherwise, they kind of just forget and it goes nowhere. That's not how companies buy. Decision makers are not scrolling your website being like, oh, wow, that is a phenomenal sales page for operations consulting. Yeah, let me buy it immediately. Where is the PayPal link? They're just not, and I know that sounds really facetious. And I'm really sorry if you spent tons of money on a website that looks really pretty and you've got a sales page on there. But honestly, corporates aren't buying from sales pages. They're also not buying from social media posts. So if you have been, dying a death on LinkedIn because you are putting out 4 posts a week that advertise your latest offer and nobody's buying it, don't worry. They weren't going to buy it anyway. It's not because your copywriting wasn't very good or, because you weren't interesting enough. It's just not how they buy. And when people say to me, but it is, I refer them to things like procurement teams, who are literally entire divisions of people who are responsible for supporting organizations in buying products and services. I know a lot of people who work in procurement and head up procurement functions in organizations. And I tell you what they're not doing is scrolling LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram every night thinking, oh yeah, we need some coaching. That post was really good. We should get that. It's just not happening. Decision makers inside organizations require sales calls to buy. Okay. And your sales calls are generated by proactive lead generation. So if you are currently feeling the pressure to create and spend a lot of money on a corporate sales page, don't worry about it. They're not going to buy from there anyway. If you're feeling a lot of pressure and, being told to invest in social media posts or graphics for social media or anything like that to do with your offer, don't invest in it. Instead, you should absolutely be spending your time honing your lead generation skills and honing your sales call skills, because without them, you will not get any sales calls and you will not be able to handle them in a way that's going to sell anything anyway. Okay, so don't spend time. I mean, we could phrase that as don't waste time on social media posts or sales pages for your corporate clients. If you want to do it B2C, absolutely do it. Create loads of them, put them everywhere. But for corporates, it's a big no, and you just don't need to. Okay. The other thing that we have to think about is offers and who companies buy from. So I hear a lot, or I get asked a lot, does it matter if I'm a limited company, if I'm self-employed or a sole trader? Honestly, it doesn't. Companies do not care about whether or not you are a limited company. They don't care whether or not you have a VAT number, whether you're VAT registered. They don't care what your company name is, in all honesty. What they care about is transformation. Are you presenting a solution that actually solves a problem that they have? Yes or no? Do they believe that you can deliver that solution to help them get the transformation that they want? Yes or no? That's all they're interested in. So if you are thinking, oh gosh, in order to sell my offer, I need to be a limited company, or in order to sell my offer, I need to have a really professional business name, or I need to not use my own name or do use my own name, those things aren't relevant to you selling your offer. I promise you. It isn't going to make any difference. So instead, take a step back and focus on things like, am I actually solving the right problem here? Am I showing on sales calls that I'm able to help them get the transformation that they need? And that's not about pitching you. It's not about pitching all your qualifications and services. That's really about being able to handle a sales call properly and asking the right questions to help that decision maker feel heard, to get them to self-identify that there are problems in their organization and that there are commercial benefits to solving those problems. That's what's going to make the biggest difference in your offer, not being VAT registered, not having a different business name, not whether you're a limited company or a sole trader or whatever. Those things aren't going to be relevant, okay? Then we have things like bonuses. So I was asked this for the first time in a while recently about whether or not you need to have bonuses and free things for selling your services to corporates or getting more sales from corporate clients. And I love this because the answer is no. You absolutely don't need to have bonuses. They are not relevant with a corporate offer. And let's talk about why. Again, when we're selling business to consumer, years and years ago, there was a school of thought, I think it's called value stacking. And the idea was that you would sell an offer, so you would sell the service that you actually wanted to sell and deliver. And then in order to persuade people to buy it, you would include a load of free stuff that you've said was worth a bunch of money, and that would make people buy the original offer. As you can probably tell from my tone, I don't necessarily agree with them being sold in the B2C world either, because my school of thought is, well, if you've already created an amazing offer that is genuinely going to remove the problem that somebody has and give them the transformation that they want, why should we be having to add 1,000 other things for free and saying, yeah, you can also have this spreadsheet worth £297. You can also have this PDF of every email I've ever sent for £300 or worth, £300, all for free if you buy today. And, don't get me wrong, we all do it. I've given out bonuses on my products and services. So if you're sat there thinking, oh, don't be a hypocrite, like we've all done it. I have done it. I've definitely said to people, in fact, I think every year I usually do it for converting corporates. I say to people, if you're going to come to the event and you buy a ticket before a certain time, then you're also going to get access to the New Year planning session that we do as a bonus to help set you up for success before you even attend. These are things that, realistically, I would include. They're not things that I think, people should be penalized or not get the transformation that they want out of the event or product or service that I'm selling if they weren't available. But on the corporate side, they don't need that or want it. And in fact, it's quite a dangerous sales tool to try and use when you're selling to corporates, because the school of thought is, well, if you've put together a solution, but it also needs these other 10 things worth this extra amount of money, then how can we be sure it will work? Because wouldn't they already be included? Aren't we already paying for them? Suddenly it's not free. They're not free bonuses. Okay. You also have to think about how we train people to treat us. And when we offer lots and lots and lots for free, it's easy for companies to go, oh, well, rather than paying you for these things, why don't we just ask you a few more questions and see whether we can get some free consulting? And again, before you start thinking, well, yeah, but they shouldn't ask for free consulting because it's not an integrity and blah, blah, blah. Let's be real. That's not their job to manage your or my boundaries. Okay, so it is natural for them to think, well, if you're going to give us lots of free stuff, where does that stop? And you're going to have to be the one that monitors that. And that's why, again, freebies don't work for selling to corporates. Slight tangent, but I see lots of people who focus on, should I give away a questionnaire, or should I give away some kind of report, or should I do these things to get more people onto my list? When you're selling to corporates, this isn't necessary. And in fact, it can be really damaging, particularly for inexperienced sellers, because it trains them that you will give things for free. And it encourages them to ask for more for free from you. And that relies on you turning around and saying, actually, no, this would be paid, and having to deal with the fallout of that. This is why people get so many hang-ups about things like pricing, because they start to think that when they enforce their boundaries, that the company subsequently doesn't want to work with them because of their price. And actually it's not. It's just because, they took enough for free and they don't see why they should pay anymore. Right? So we have to really be aware that the way that we are presenting our business, our sales process, our offers, etc., it trains people how to treat us. And that can become really, really problematic to resolve if you are not an experienced salesperson, or if you struggle to reset boundaries with people. And it's a big reason that free bonuses just don't work when we're selling to corporate clients. Now, finally, and I think this is the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this episode, the biggest learn or breakthrough or takeaway, or however you want to phrase it, that I want you to have from this episode is that selling your offers depends on your lead generation and sales call skills, not on the offer itself. Let's repeat that for the people at the back. Okay. Selling your offer depends on your lead generation and sales call skills, not on the offer itself. And there is a reason for this. Of course, features and benefits of any offer can help encourage a decision maker to buy it. But there's so much more that goes into selling a solution to companies, because actually you need other things that are more important. Buy-in. You need to manage expectations around how much it's going to cost so that they can build a business case. You need to help get them to a point where they, as the decision maker, have self-identified, yes, there is a problem, and yes, there is a commercial benefit to us solving that problem, so that they want to buy any offer that you put in front of them. So much of the time, people who are inexperienced salespeople focus on the offer because it's the things that they can control, and it's the practicalities that they think matter. How is it going to be delivered? Over how many weeks? When are the calls going to be? How much is it going to cost? How many workbooks will they get with it? Those are not the things that a decision maker is considering when they are looking to buy. They're looking for, did this person accurately show me that there is a problem in our organization and help me understand why that problem is occurring, relating to their area of specialism. They are looking for you to support them in self-identifying that there is a commercial reason or benefit to fixing that problem or moving to that level of transformation. They are looking for you in your sales call to help them start building a business case so that either they can sign it off themselves or they can take it to people who will. And before you start thinking, oh, well, this sounds much longer and more complex than selling B2C, these are all things that are based on logic, that are based on developing good relationships, that are based on actual prioritization of transformation rather than price. And so often people are worried about whether or not a company bought their offer or didn't because of price, rather than focusing on having a sales process that sets them up to sell at a price point that is premium, where the stakeholder isn't quibbling over it. So if you are somebody who's consistently selling to corporates, but you're not selling at the price point you want, or you're having to get lots and lots of new clients all the time, so you're undercharging, and you are because you're having to get lots and lots of new business, you could remove all of that pain by setting up a lead generation process that turns into qualified sales calls with decision makers who actually want to be on the call and want to explore that area with you. And in your sales call, if you were developing your sales call skills and becoming competent with sales calls and running them, you would be effectively supporting them to diagnose their issue. You'd be helping them get clarity around what the real problem is and why it's occurring. You would be getting buy-in subconsciously from them on working with you. You would be establishing credibility and authority without ever having to pitch yourself or talk about your qualifications. You would be working with them to co-create offers and solutions that actually meet the need that they want to pay for. And you would be able to sell at premium price points every single month without worrying. But most people aren't. And it is not because their offer doesn't have the right sales page, and it's not because they didn't hire a fancy copywriter to get the wording right, and it's not because they didn't have graphics or social media, and it's not because, it didn't end in a 7, the price, or a 9. It's because they are not running lead generation processes that turn into sales calls, or sales calls that actually operate in the right way. What's happening is people are procrastinating on their sales process and saying that part of their sales process, and the most important part, is creating offers, because that makes us feel like we're doing something, and it makes us feel like we're still in that comfort zone, when actually it is delaying the inevitable and making it much, much harder for you to sell. So hopefully that's explained a little bit about why offer creation should not be top of your priority list, and why you should be focusing on your sales process at large first. It is so, so, so important. Okay. And just before we end today's episode, I want to share another small tidbit with you just before we go, so that you are fully competent and confident to move forward. And I think that it's really, really important for us to start thinking, especially as we head into this summer period, about how we want to operate our businesses in the second half of the year. Because if you haven't gotten all of the results that you wanted in the first half of this year, it's really important to understand why. And if that is, you've been spending lots and lots of time on creating offers and then feeling like it's really hard to sell them and you don't have anyone to sell them to, this is your problem. And you need to think about that and actually think about changing your priorities so that in the second half of the year, you don't have the same experiences. Okay. So that final tidbit I mentioned is about price. Okay. And price is not the key indicator or key qualifier for selling offers to corporates consistently. Inside the C-suite and other programs, I actually talk a lot about the 4 key pieces of information actually needed for you to get from a sales call in order to successfully sell a corporate offer. And only one of them is about budget expectation. Okay. And actually managing their expectations around budget rather than talking about what they want to pay, because what they want to pay and what they actually need to pay for solutions can be very, very different. But so many people are focusing on things that, aren't right in their sales process and, trying to mitigate their offers with things like fancy funnels or lots of technology or sales pages or having really aesthetic proposals that are really well designed but don't actually convey the important information about the offer, that they are forgetting the real meaningful bits about their sales process. So I want you to start looking back over the offers that you haven't sold, and instead of analysing them and saying, oh, well, it was just price, it must have been price, I must have been charging too much, I want you to actually think, well, did I actually run a sales process there? Was it even a qualified offer that I was putting out in a proposal? Did I actually have the information I needed to present the right solution? Did I ever actually ask the client for feedback? And, did they say price or did they say something else that I can use to learn from? Because a lot of the time, in fact, in over 90% of occasions, price isn't the reason that companies didn't go with your offer. A lot of the time it is about the diagnostic skill you had on the sales call and whether you presented the solution that met the need and got the buy-in required to actually go ahead with it. There are other ways to do that. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, make sure that you sign up to that free newsletter. Like I say, they do come out every Wednesday and Friday afternoon so that you can learn more about the practical skills needed behind selling to corporates and, of course, get inspiration and motivation to do it even when you don't feel like it. I will see you in the next episode where we'll be talking about your half-year analysis so far and thinking about what you need to do and change to have the best second half to 2025 possible. See you then.